Hi, Kirby Scruples here. I am back with another storytime video, and this is about my experience as growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, and this story is going to be catered towards my friendship with Stephen Camp. Now, some of you may kind of already know about Stephen Camp because of his sister. She has her own YouTube channel, and she kind of exposed some things about the governing body members and what happened to her brother. And so yeah, this is touching on her brother and how I knew him and my relationship with him. So we were just friends, and I was growing up in the Midwest and he was in the South, and his family ended up moving to the Midwest in the same congregation that my family was going to. And Stephen and I became close because after several meetings, he kind of was just like watching and observing me. And he was like, hey, you know, I noticed this thing like with your hair. How come you wear your hair like this? Or how come, you know, you're wearing hats and scarves or whatever with your hair? And like, that's when I had told him, like, you know, I don't really know why I do this, but I just have like this urge to like pull out my hair, and like I have like, you know, spots, like missing patches of hair because I'm like pulling it out, and I don't know why I do it, and all these little different things that I was telling him. And I just thought it was like really brave and commendable that he had like came up and asked me about it, because no one else in my age group ever came up to me and asked me about my condition or what was going on with me. And you know, after I told him that, he was like really understanding. And then it was just like, after that, even more so, he was coming up to me and like, hey, like, let me show you this, or hey, you know, just talk, we're just talk, like after the meeting and stuff like that. Well, we also had Bible study at his family's house too. So we got even closer because of that, because we were in the same territory of where his family was living, and we had Bible study at his house every Monday. So our schedule was Monday Bible study, Wednesday theocratic ministry school, and then Sunday was a public talk and watchtower, right? And then of course Saturday was designated to field service if you already weren't doing that throughout the week. Well, you know, me and Stephen just got like even closer as friends. Like we would have potluck like once a month at his family's house after Bible study meeting. And his mom would make like this really awesome like cheese dip, and it was just so good. And she gave the recipe to my mom. And so my mom would start making it for like the parties and stuff that she would throw for the congregation. I remember when I was in the 8th grade, we had an 8th grade school dance, and my mom told me that I could go. And she was like, well, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to be a part of like the school dance committee, so I can kind of make sure that I'm there to like monitor and chaperone, and you know, I can volunteer with that. And yeah, you can go to the 8th grade school dance. And I just thought that was just so awesome. And then she suggested that I ask Stephen. And the reason why she was like, you know, yeah, you should ask Stephen to go with you, was because like Stephen got to the point where me and him were so cool and close, and not just me, but with my other siblings too, that like my parents were cool with Stephen coming over to the house and hanging at the house, and like his parents dropping him off for a couple hours, and then him just chill at our house, and like we'd go in the backyard and play, or we do whatever, like watch a show or play games in the basement and that kind of thing. And you know, the idea never came to cross my head like if I ever like romantically had an interest in Stephen, until like other people would say stuff like, oh, do you like Stephen, or like, do you have a crush on him, or you know, that kind of thing. Like, and then I would be kind of like, do I? And then I'd be kind of like, I don't know. Like, I just wasn't in that. I was never the girl. I was never the girl that was like, I can't wait to get married and I'm going to name my kids Tom, Dick, and Harry. That was just not me, right? Now, eventually I ended up getting like that as I got older. And it's not like to say that I didn't have crushes, but Stephen just wasn't one of my crushes. But I did value him as my friend. And I just did not have a lot of close friends like that. Like, not at school and not in the congregation. And not that I was supposed to have close friends that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses anyway. And the close friends that I did have, they weren't really witnesses, and they didn't go to the same school as I did. And it was just, they were like kind of far away. There was some distance in between where we lived or whatever, right? So Stephen was one of those friends that was like nearby. I got to see him often, right? And he didn't judge me. So my mom was like, well, why don't you ask Stephen to see if he'll go to school dance with you? Like, wouldn't that be nice? And I'd be like, actually, yeah, because at school, I was the weakest link. Like I said, I looked awkward because I had missing patches of hair in my head, and like I had awkward hairstyles and just all these different things. And Stephen just never treated me like weird or looked at me different or anything like that. And so I called him, and his mom, he said he had to ask his mom, because he seemed like, when I called him, he was like, oh, okay. Like he seemed like, he was like, yeah, I'd go. Kind of, he didn't say that necessarily, but it seemed like in his voice, he was like interested. He's like, okay, but I'm gonna ask my mom. And then he goes to ask his mom. I waited on the phone for a little bit, and then he comes back on the phone, and his tone was so different. And I was just like, okay. And he was like, yeah, because of this. And it was like all scriptural reasons, you know, Jehovah's Witness scriptural reasons, right? And I was just like, okay, yeah, I get it. I understand. It's fine. Not a big deal, right? So I was a little disappointed, but like I wasn't like torn up about it. I was like, I'm still going to school dance, right? And the way I showed up at the school dance, oh my gosh, I looked so grandma. Anyways, but at the time, I thought I was like really pretty, and I just thought I had like a really nice dress, and like, oh my gosh. And then I showed up to the school dance, and I'm just looking at everybody else. I was like, oh my God, all these other girls look so much better, and I'm looking like grandma. But you know, whatever, that was then. So y'all can kind of see the struggle I was going through. Anyway, so I don't have the exact timeline right here, okay? So anyway, so Stephen's sister ends up marrying another guy in our congregation. And also, too, let me say this. These families are fairly new to me because I grew up in this congregation, and Stephen's family was a new family in our congregation. Then Brandy, his sister, who ended up marrying another guy, his family was new. And the guy, let's say his name is Andy, okay? His family was new to our congregation. And then another family came in, and let's say her name is Mandy, right? Her family was new. And then another family, and let's say like Nathan and his family, they were a new family too. So all these new families in our congregation within like a year or two, right, are kind of new. So Mandy's family moves in, and I think by this time, Brandy was already married to Andy, okay? Or they were definitely a couple in engaged or something, if not already married. And then Mandy moves in, and Stephen was just kind of like, who is that? Like, who is this girl, Mandy? And just Stephen had the hugest crush for Mandy. And like, he always was talking about Mandy. Mandy this, Mandy that. Like, you know, not like a good 7% of the time was about Mandy this. And like him just having googly eyes for Mandy, right? It was devastating when this other family, Nathan's family, moves in, and Nathan takes a liking to Mandy. And I don't really know if Mandy ever knew, because I never went up to Mandy and was like, oh, did you know Stephen likes you? Or do you know Stephen like I never had that conversation with Mandy. And I've only had very few interactions with Mandy. We went out on field service like maybe twice, and then I went over to her house like twice. I remember going to her house, and in her pantry, they had like this huge box of Reese cups. And then I remember her telling me that her dad loves Reese cups. And like, I remember having like one too many Reese cups. And I was just like, hey, how are they having this huge box of Reese cups in here? And then not just like, I would have killed that box of Reese cups. Like, I could not do that. Anyway, that's just a side note. That's just one thing I remember about going to her house. I think I went to her house to hang out with her like twice. We would go in her basement, and she had like a trampoline or something down there. And she was like in dance and ballet and tap dancing or something like that. And, you know, she kind of had like that stuff. So she would kind of like be dancing in the basement and showing us like some dance moves and things like that. And I'd be looking at her like, girl, okay, we could try this. But she was fun. She was fun. I never told her about Stephen having a crush on her or whatever. And she never mentioned it to me. Like I said, our interaction was not like a handful of times, right? But she ends up basically getting engaged and married to Nathan. And I remember like Stephen just like low-key losing his mind. Like just really upset about it. Like he was being so chill about it on the outside, but on the inside, it was tearing him up, okay? Based off my perspective, based off the conversations I remember me and Stephen having, like, it wasn't like he, you know, he was maintaining emotional control, okay? I'll say that. But he was like torn up about it, okay? And then I ended up eventually moving to the South, right? So I had to do my last 2 years of high school here in the South, where I still reside now. And Steve and I still remain in contact. Oh, you know what? Let me rewind a little bit back, because this is kind of significant, okay? So this is around the time where I was like in 8th grade or high school. I was probably in high school still at this time. And Stephen calls the house phone, because this is before we had cell phones. We had the house phone still, right? I answer the phone, and Stephen's like, hey, you want to go do this thing? Some event he wanted to go to and invited me to go to. And I was just like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm cool with doing that or whatever. And then he's like, he said something like, where's your scruples? And I'm like, what? He's like, where are your scruples? And he said it in some like kind of goofy voice too, right? And I was just like, what are you talking, where's scruples? He's like, you never heard of scruples? And I was like, no. Like, what is that? He was like, get on the computer right now and look up. We didn't even have, it wasn't even Google at that time. It was Ask Jeeves. So I'm on Ask Jeeves looking up this episode from Saturday Night Live that he tells me to look up, because he was like, you never seen that episode on Saturday Night Live? I'm like, no, like I don't watch that, like, because JWs, we don't watch stuff like that. Well, apparently he did. And he was like, look up this episode on Saturday Night Live and blah, 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 and you'll see the part about scruples. And I'm just like, anyways, he ends up telling me that scruples is basically like, you know, having manners. And I was just like, oh, okay. And Stephen was really big on manners, like how you dress and how you conduct yourself and carry yourself and stuff like that. But I didn't kind of figure that out until like later. And I'm very aloof, okay? Especially when I was younger. I can be very like, la 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 la. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So whatever I had said or did or responded to him, he was just probably like, where are your scruples? And I wasn't getting that. But I just remember him having me look at, he was so adamant about me looking this up. And I don't even remember the episode. I don't even remember, like, I remember going and actually looking it up and watching it, but I can't remember like if it was actually funny or not. No, it wasn't funny, because I remember thinking like, this is stupid. But him saying it, Stephen saying it to me was funny. And then I'm like, what is scruples, right? Okay, I digress from that. So, okay, years move on, right? I'm now in the South, finishing my last 2 years of high school up, and Stephen at some point left public school and went to just like homeschool. And because of that, he started working at a bank. Okay, so he's working at this bank, and he's still in the Midwest and I'm in the South, and we're still like hitting each other up. And he was like, hey, I got a bank job now and this, that, and the third. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I remember telling him that, you know, I was looking for a job. He was like, well, try to work at the bank. I work at Wachovia. If you want to, you can use me as a reference, blah, blah, blah. I tried to do that. I couldn't pass the test and all this little different stuff. I couldn't know. I was just like, oh, Stephen, I don't think it's going to work out. Anyway, so Stephen was like really smart to me, you know, and especially since he had, I don't even think he had a GED yet. Yeah, I don't even think he had a GED yet. And he did not have his high school diploma because, like I said, he went homeschool and he had got this bank job. So I think he ended up moving back to the South at some point. I'm graduated now, and I still don't think he had his GED yet. I don't remember. He got his GED like later, right? But I don't remember at what point, but he eventually got it. Like, I think it was after the time we were supposed to like graduate. Like if he was still in public school, I think we would have graduated in the same year, or he would have graduated a year before me. But I think he got his GED like after I had graduated, like sometime after. So he would drive down because he had a car, and he ended up moving to the South, back down to the South. And he would drive 2 hours up to where my family lived. And, you know, he would call and say like, hey, I want to come visit you guys. Is it okay, like, if I come stay at y'all's house? And I'd be like, Mom, Dad, can Stephen come stay here, blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. And we had like plenty of rooms in our house for him to have his own room and bathroom and stuff like that. And then, you know, of course, all of me and my siblings, we had our own room and stuff. So we would like go to Six Flags, amusement parks, like those traveling carnivals. If y'all go back and watch one of my other videos, I had mentioned my friend La Cienega. So she got a chance to meet him too. And there was some, we would always go to the movies. Like she would tag along with us too. And then like after the movies, we would go to like some restaurant. And there was like this rooftop restaurant that was across the street from the movie theater that one of my siblings had worked at the time. So we were getting free tickets in the movies, and then we'd go across the street and go to this rooftop restaurant, and we would chill there. Now, I remember one incident that was there, and Stephen and I took a picture together. It's like one of those like little selfie pictures, right? And then I remember him like kind of being upset about one of his parents and like saying like, oh, they're kind of harsh and this and that and the third. And I was just like, yeah, really? And like he would kind of mention that off and on throughout our friendship. And I was just like, okay, you know, but like, I kept thinking like, we can't be that bad if they're like letting you, you know, come drive all the way up here. And he was just being very vague about it too. And I was immature, okay, being aloof and immature. And I take Stephen's phone and I send the picture to his parent. And he got so mad. No, he didn't just get mad, he got scared. And then that scared me because I was just like why are you this scared? Like, I was just like, that doesn't seem normal. Like, why are you this like scared? And then he was also like really irritated. I remember he even kind of like gritted his teeth at me. He was like, why did you do that? Like, you know, in a guy way, of course. And I was just like, I was just trying to be like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be that bad or that serious. And he was just like, no, like, this is not okay. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so at that point, that's when like a huge turn kind of took with me and Stephen's relationship, right? And then him and one of my other siblings kind of got even more closer because I started hearing certain comments from, you know, Stephen, like, you know, basically implying that I was irresponsible. And looking back, I was. And I was the type of person where I was just going with the flow. I had no plan in life. And now here I am to this day, 35. And that was because of the mindset I had that I took from growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. Like, why have a plan? The plan is the end of the world is ending. Duh. Like, what? Why am I going to put, you know, all this energy and effort in achieving anything in this world when this world's going to end and I'm, you know, I'm waiting for paradise? That was my mindset. So, like I said, outside looking at me, he's looking at me like I'm irresponsible and, you know, I wasn't carrying myself well, I wasn't dressing up well, I wasn't preparing myself well for a lot of things. And he would kind of mention stuff like that. So then when I had sent that picture to one of his parents and then he got like upset, like that took like a turning point. Like now we still like talked and stuff like that. But it was just different after that. And I always felt really, really bad about that. And I don't even remember if I really apologized. You know, at that moment in time, I was like, oh, I didn't know, but I don't think I ever really said like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't realize that this was going to cause you, you know, some type of harm. Like, because the way he looked, I was just in shock, and I was like stunned. Like, I was confused too. Like, this is not normal. So, you know, he would still come to Georgia, and then he would still come and visit. And then also too, another thing that he was kind of like annoyed with me about is that I never like was able to pay for these events that we would go to, or like I wasn't able to pay the full amount, or I couldn't pay for the ticket, but I couldn't afford my food and stuff like that. And he would like, you know, always like volunteer for the bill. So he did that a couple of times, and like money's racking up, and you know, it was a couple $100s that he had, you know, spent on me over time. Whereas like my other sibling, she always had, you know, her funds and money, and was able to always pay her way. And so I remember I got this job, and I was working this job for a while, and I was administrative assistant, and Stephen came in town, and I was like, oh, Stephen, do you think you can drive me to the ATM really quick? And he was like, yeah, because we were about to go to some other event. And so then I pull out $320 or something like that, because I remember I was like, okay, he bought me this, he got that, da, 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 da. And I was like, it's about this much. And then I handed to him, and he was like, you're actually paying me back? And I was like, yeah. And then he was just like, I just never thought he would, because he never asked me either. He never asked me to pay him back. I always just said, oh, I'll be able to pay you back. I don't, you know, kind of like, I don't know when, but I'll be able to pay you back, right? Which I always kind of like that, like, I'll be able to do this thing, don't know when or how, but I always find a way of being able to do it. And I think at the time I didn't have that job. No, actually I did have that job, but I was still like getting some stuff together. So yeah, I was just like, yeah, here's money. Like, I said I was going to pay you back, I just didn't know when, kind of thing. And then he was just like, what, like, just, you know, and just thought, I don't know what he thought. He was just so shocked that I actually paid him back. So like, that was like a lot of our friendship. And there was a couple times where he would call, and he would be like, yeah, I'm actually in your area, I just didn't let you guys know because, you know, I wanted to meet this girl, you know, she's a Jehovah's Witness, and I met her online, but she kind of catfished me. She said she was this, and she really wasn't. And then there was a couple times, like, he had told me, like, he had came up to meet some girl, and, you know, they weren't either compatible, or she catfished him somehow, or whatever. And I started kind of seeing, like, you know, Stephen has some pretty high standards here, which, you know, Stephen always had himself looking nice, though. You know, he always kept himself put together. I mean, I didn't really pay attention to it, like, because I wasn't looking at him like that. But when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, Stephen was always like, his suits were always looking nice. He always had his hair cut. And like, I remember, okay, because not only did we go to events and stuff like that, he would also come to our conventions. So he would come to our conventions, and there was one comment, he was like, this is not a Sunday convention outfit, Kirby. Like, what are you wearing? And I'm just like, this is a comfortable outfit. Like, I am not, I was just not like totally into, I was, but I wasn't. Like, I was when I felt like it, you know, but Stephen was like always like that, right? And he was just like so annoyed that I wasn't wearing like this really super nice Sunday convention outfit. I guess a lot of people were wearing their best outfits on Sunday. I missed that memo, and not did I ever care about anything like that. So I remember at this convention, he was annoyed at my outfit, and he asked me, he was like, do you think it's weird that I go get like a manicure? And then he like shows me his hand, and I'm just like, I grab his hand, I'm like looking at it, I'm just like, looks fine to me. Like, it's not like you got red nail polish on. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, your hands just look really clean. And like, if you like being clean. I don't think that's weird. That sounds normal to me. And he was just like, oh, okay. He was like, do you think that's metrosexual? And I was just like, I don't know. And so like, that was like my first introduction to him leading me to telling me that he felt like he was gay. Okay, so I can't remember exactly when he told me he was gay, but it was just kind of like, it was a phone call, and he was like, Kirby, I had to tell you something. And I was like, okay. It's like, I'm gay. And I'm like, okay, how? That, like, I feel like that was my response. I was like, how? Like, what? That just totally threw me off, because not ever once did I witness, but like I said, I'm aloof Kirby. Like, that really should be like Kirby aloof. Like, that should be like my name instead of Kirby Scruples. But I was just like, okay. And he was like, and I'm also getting disfellowshipped. And I was like, what? Why? Like, that was the shock right there, was the disfellowshipping part, right? And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I was just like, you know, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I just remember being shocked or whatever. And he seemed pretty upset about it, you know. So, you know, some time went by and I didn't hear from Stephen, and it was like he didn't get reinstated. So, you know, I still reached out because, you know, I'm still the one that, you know, if I see a disfellowship person and I'm out and about at the mall, I'm still waving hi. Especially if it's like someone who's my elder. Like, it's just weird to like walk past someone that you basically have known all your life and not acknowledge them. That's disrespectful and weird, especially when they're like someone who's old enough to have like birthed and raised you as their child. So I, you know, I was always that one that would be like, oh, hi, sister so-and-so, or hi, brother so-and-so, you know, and they'd be like, hi, you know, and just kind of carry on, kind of like with their head down. And then like that, I did not ever like that energy. That was just because I did not see them with that label of being disfellowshipped, right? So I felt the same way, of course, about my friend Stephen. So like, I reached out and he'd be like, Kirby, I can't talk, I'm still disfellowshipped. And I'd be like, okay, well, you know, I just, you know, it's fine, I don't care, I'm not gonna tell anybody that we talked. And he'd be like, I cannot talk to you, I'm disfellowshipped. And like, he was just like taking that serious. And I was just like, okay. Ugh. And so then I kind of started realizing like Stephen's really like serious, like super by the book, black and white. And my other sibling was like that, like they are very black and white, by the book. And I was just kind of like, Jehovah can read my heart content. Like, that was me. Like, that was my attitude on that. Like, Jehovah knows my intentions. Jehovah knows that when I did this or said that that's not what I meant, or like whatever, it was just a misunderstanding, I'll clear it up, you know, or I didn't even know that this person thought whatever, right? So that was in my mind. No one else saw that on the outside. And then I started kind of just seeing like, this is too much. I'm not about to be walking around on this level of strictness. Like, even before I just decided to leave, I was not walking on that level of strictness. And like, I ended up started dating this one guy that I was working with, and he was quite a bit older, and he also grew up a Jehovah's Witness. Now, he never told me why he decided to leave. Like, I would always ask him, and he would never tell me why. Well, I ended up telling Stephen that I'm dating this guy, and he was like very annoyed by me by that. He was just like, you have no business dating this older guy, and he's not even a witness anymore. And I remember just being like, whatever, you know? And I don't ever remember, I can't remember if he got reinstated and then got disfellowshipped again, or if he just stayed disfellowshipped the entire time. But the last time I was able to speak to him was in 2018, and not even speak, actually. This was through text message. And I remember calling him and he did not answer. And I reached out to him because I'm like, hey, I'm in New York, are you here? Because he eventually moved to New York, okay? I can't remember exactly when, but he moved to New York for a while, and I thought maybe he was still there. And I was just like, hey, I'm in New York, I'm in Astoria, and like, I want to go out and have fun. Let's meet up. And he was like, oh, I'm not here. It was something like that. If I can find the text messages, I'll post it. And it was just like, after that, like, he just didn't respond. He just stopped messaging. Like, he just kept it like, I don't know. And I just kind of took that as like, you know, is he still mad at me for sending that picture? Or is he just really think that I am just like not good association because, you know, I was dating that guy, and then like some of my actions and stuff like that. And I was just, you know, I didn't know. And then in 2020, March of 2020, I get a phone call from one of my family members, and they tell me that Stephen had passed away. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, Stephen took his own life. And I was just like, what? And I was like, when? And then, you know, they ended up telling me like, it was like back in January. So I'm like finding out months later. And then like, they're not even all the way sure. And then later I find out he like writes this letter. And he writes a letter basically stating that the reason why this happened is because of growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. Now, I had already left in 2019, the winter of 2019. And that was because of the CSA allegations that came to light with the Australian Royal Commission. So I was like, there's no way I can be behind an organization that's covering up stuff like that. Like, that's just unexcusable. And that is totally against everything that I grew up learning and knowing about this organization. So that they were doing this for years, and I'm seeing evidence left and right. No. I'm not associated with this organization anymore. No, don't care. And so then the whole situation, me finding out about my friend Stephen, I was devastated because I didn't get to go to the funeral. The last time I talked to him, I felt like he was still mad at me. That is what had motivated me to start my YouTube channel after making the initial video of like why I decided to leave, because I felt like other people needed to know. And I thought originally I was doing that anonymously because, you know, I was not a YouTuber like that. I wasn't really known. And then come to find out, the congregation I was going to ended up finding out anyway. So it's like, how did you find out? Unless you were like looking up videos. And I guess that's what they were doing. And they found my video. But then, you know, this whole thing happens with Stephen, and I was like, I'm gonna make another video. I'm gonna start talking about what goes on, you know, in my side of things, and like what I experienced and the restrictions. So that's when I had made that video with Metaphor. I'm not using people's real names, but yeah. And that's why I changed my name. I changed my YouTube name to Kirby Scruples, because that is how I wanted to dedicate my little way of like remembering this is why I dedicated to standing by my decision in leaving. Even though it has cost me a lot of friendships and family members even. It's taken me a long time to make this video. I've attempted to make this video several times. Yeah, that's why I decided to be a volunteer representative of this Be Free 2023 protest that's happening in Washington, D.C. on October 31st from 10 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. And you know, we've gotten a lot of like ugly comments and just a lot of naysayers coming in saying negative things and protests don't work. And we're a small team of people who were in this high control religion, and we just are doing the best with the resources and the information and the limited education that we have to make a change. Let me pull myself together. So yeah, this is a peaceful protest, and we can't we can only promote peace, okay? We have no control of what other individuals decide to do, but for the most part, the responses and the people who are reaching out to me and other members of the Be Free 2023 team, we're getting a high amount of people who want to see this protest to be very successful. So, you know, there's high security at the White House. I was going to call it national security, but Homeland Security. Homeland Security is there. They're not trying to have any crazy stuff happen or anything like that. We make several calls to them asking and reiterating the level of security there. And I know one question that came up recently was, what happens if it rains? Is there any accommodations for that? As of right now, I bring an umbrella, and we're still going to be protesting at the White House, rain or shine. And then another question came in about restrooms, and we know that there are public restrooms at the President's Park, not too far away from the White House. So not too far away is relative. I don't know, like, if it's like, I know it's walking distance, but I don't know how far of a walk. It could be like a 5-minute walk or a 15-minute walk. I'm not entirely sure. I don't live in that area, but we're getting more information, and I post a lot of updated information on my Instagram stories. I'm excited for this protest, and pretty soon I did purchase one of the Be Free 2023 hoodies, so I'll be wearing that, or at least I think I'll be wearing that. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be wearing, but I did have that as an option to wear. Yeah, I wanted to put in that information about the protest because I know people are having questions, and it ties into why I decided to do this protest, and you know, for many reasons, and that was one of the biggest ones, is because of my friend Stephen. And you know, I never felt any kind of way about him feeling like he was gay or anything. I didn't understand it, but it's not anything that I fully expressed to him because it didn't matter, because he was my friend. And when I say I didn't understand it, it was just because, like, it just threw me off. I just never noticed any of that before in him. And I imagine a lot of people who are in that situation, they hide it. They probably go through extreme things to hide that feeling. So I wanted to say that. And then I also want to mention that it wasn't until much later that I found out that his uncle gave a talk, like, I want to say maybe a week or 2 weeks after, the same month of his passing, about how homosexuals are, like, bad.
There will be many others who will come back, who will have to abandon their former way of life. I was thinking, as an example, a homosexual. Now, this former homosexual comes back in the resurrection, and he really thought, And he was taught and he came to believe that God accepted him with that lifestyle. But now he's going to learn about Jehovah's moral standards. And he's going to learn that Jehovah will not lower his standard to accommodate us. We have to come up to Jehovah's standard. Will he change? Will he adjust? It'll be up to him. But you, brothers and sisters, will help such ones to enjoy life eternal. All must learn to walk in Jehovah's righteous ways and willingly choose to do so. But now, what if someone refuses to make the necessary changes? Well, the Watchtower commented on that. It said, after being given ample time, maybe even 100 years, to seek God, some will show that they refuse to practice righteousness. Justly, they will lose life in the new world, as we can see from Isaiah 65, verse 12, which says, and the sinner will be cursed, even though he is 100 years of age.
And it was just a very ugly talk. It is very highly insensitive. And and to know that Stephen Lett, to know that Stephen Lett is his uncle. And he gave that talk, like your nephew died, is gone, buried. And then you think it's okay to give this talk. And it was just so heartless. And I was just like really disgusted by that. Like, they just don't care. Like, they're okay with ruining people's lives and seeing your own nephew done away with. Like, you're really just that messed up. And, you know, that was just even more of a reason, because I was still kind of like, oh, well, you know, I really, like, you can see it in my first video that I did about me, the reason why I decided to leave. Like, you know, these are things I still appreciated. And like, yeah, I am a type of person where I take the good and leave the bad. But there was a lot of bad, you know, that I was brainwashed and coerced into thinking it was okay. And that was the way we should be carrying on, you know? In memory of my friend Stephen, I will be showing up to this protest, and in memory of a lot of individuals who I no longer speak to anymore because of the shunning and isolation and all that this organization has caused, I'll be showing up at that protest. And I hope you are able to too, or at least be able to support it.